The mud came up over the road wheels. It was the 29th of August, 1942, near a small Russian town called Maga, just southeast of Leningrad. 4 brand-new tanks pushed forward through a forest of birch trees and soft, wet bog. They were the most powerful tanks on Earth, and 3 of them were about to break down before they fired a single useful shot. These were Tigers. The very first Tigers ever sent into battle. Their commander, Major Richard Marker, had begged his superiors not to do this. The ground here was all swamp and drainage ditches. The autumn rains had turned it to soup. A tank that weighed 57 tons needed firm earth under its tracks. Marker knew his machines would sink. He said so, plainly, more than once. He was overruled. So the Tigers went forward, and the swamp did exactly what he feared. Thick mud packed itself between the road wheels. The engines strained, the gearboxes screamed. One tank after another ground to a halt. By the end of the day, the wonder weapon of the German Reich sat helpless in the mire while ordinary infantry trudged past. It took 3 of the army's biggest recovery vehicles working through the night to drag a single Tiger free. This was the debut of the most feared tank of the Second World War. It was a disaster. And inside that disaster sits one of the strangest truths of the entire war. The Tiger was a magnificent machine. On the right ground, against the right enemy, it was almost unbeatable. Yet the men who built it, the factories that produced it, and the strategy behind it would help drag Germany toward defeat faster than almost any other decision they made. This is the story of how the tank meant to save Germany helped lose the war. To understand the Tiger, you have to understand the fear that created it. If you're an enthusiast of military technology and World War II, please consider subscribing to us. It would greatly help our channel. In the summer of 1941, German tanks rolled into the Soviet Union expecting easy victories. Instead, they met the Soviet T-34. It had thick, sloped armor. It had a good gun. It could go places German tanks could not. German crews were shocked. Their shells bounced off. Suddenly, the proud panzers felt outclassed. German commanders demanded an answer. They wanted a heavy tank that could kill anything on the battlefield and survive anything fired back. They wanted a monster. 2 companies competed for the contract. One was led by the famous Ferdinand Porsche, a personal friend of Hitler. The other was the firm of Henschel & Son, builders of locomotives. Both rushed to finish prototypes for Hitler's birthday on the 20th of April 1942. Henschel's design won. It was more conventional and easier to build. Even so, the very first test models had broken steering and serious mechanical faults. Hitler did not care. He ordered the tank into production anyway before the problems were fixed. That choice set the pattern for everything that followed. When the Tiger worked, it was breathtaking. Start with the gun. The 88mm cannon began life as an anti-aircraft weapon. It was so powerful that gunners could destroy an enemy tank well over a mile away. They could fire before the enemy even knew a Tiger was there. The shell crossed that distance in barely a second. Then there was the armor. The front plate was up to 4 inches of solid steel. In 1942 and 1943, most Allied guns simply could not punch through it from the front. Crews told stories of Tigers taking 10, 20, 30 hits and rolling on. Soviet and American gunners watched their shells spark off the steel and slide away. For the men inside, it felt like riding inside a fortress. The Tiger needed 5 men to fight. A commander, a gunner, and a loader sat in the turret. A driver and a radio operator sat in the front of the hull. Early on, these were hand-picked soldiers, the best students from the tank schools. They even visited the factory to learn how their machine was built. They knew every bolt, and many of them loved it. One of those men was Otto Carius. He would become one of the great tank commanders of the war, credited with destroying well over 150 enemy vehicles. He survived to write a memoir called Tigers in the Mud. In it, he described the first time his crew saw their new Tigers waiting under the tarpaulins. He wrote that they looked at the machines with something close to love. Here, at last, was something they could fight with. That feeling spread fast. In Tunisia, in early 1943, small numbers of Tigers gave British and American crews a brutal education. At the Great Tank Battle of Kursk in July 1943, Tigers led the German assault and knocked out Soviet tanks by the dozen. A myth was born. Allied soldiers began to see Tigers everywhere, even when there were none. Every German tank became a Tiger. Every loss got blamed on the monster. The fear became a weapon all by itself. The high point of the legend came in Normandy. On the 13th of June, 1944, a young SS officer named Michael Wittmann was leading a handful of Tigers near a French village called Villers-Bocage. Wittmann was already famous, a panzer ace with more than 100 kills on the Eastern Front. That morning, a British armoured column rolled into the village, strung out along the main road. Wittmann saw his chance. In a single Tiger, he drove straight at the British line. In roughly 15 minutes, he tore through it. By most accounts, he destroyed around a dozen tanks and a string of other vehicles. British crews never saw it coming. It was one of the most stunning single-handed actions of the entire war, and German propaganda made Wittmann a national hero overnight. But look closer at that same battle and you see the whole problem in miniature, because the day did not end in triumph. When Wittmann pushed back into the village a second time, the British were ready. Hidden anti-tank guns and a Sherman with a powerful gun were waiting. In moments, the attacking German tanks were knocked out. Wittmann's own Tiger was hit. He and his crew survived only by climbing out and running. By nightfall, the British still held the town, and the Germans had lost their first Tigers in Normandy. The legend won the headline. The reality was far messier. So here is the question that should haunt anyone who admires this machine. If the Tiger was so good, why did it not save Germany? The answer is hidden in the factory, not on the battlefield. A Tiger was a nightmare to build. Each one took about 300,000 man-hours of labor. That was nearly twice the work needed to build a Panther, and the Panther was no simple tank either. Every Tiger cost around 250,000 Reichsmarks. That was 2 to 3 times the price of a normal German tank like the Panzer IV. In a sense, every Tiger that rolled off the line meant 2 or 3 ordinary tanks that were never built, and the numbers were tiny. From August 1942 to August 1944, Germany built just 1,347 Tiger Is. That was the entire production run. The whole legend rests on barely 1,300 machines. Now hold that number up against the enemy. The United States built around 49,000 Sherman tanks. The Soviet Union built more than 80,000 T-34s. One historian put it simply: Germany's total Tiger production for the whole war equaled about 3 months of Soviet T-34 output. 3 months. Think about what that means on the ground. A German Tiger crew might knock out 5 enemy tanks in a fight and feel like gods. But the enemy could replace those 5 tanks by next week. When a Tiger was finally lost, that loss was almost impossible to make good. Each side was playing a different game. Germany was building cathedrals. The Allies were building bricks by the million. This was not a secret at the time. Heinz Guderian, the man in charge of Germany's tank forces, understood it perfectly. He had built his career on speed, on numbers, on tanks that could move and keep moving. He wanted floods of reliable medium tanks like the Panzer IV. He warned that pouring resources into a few giant machines was a mistake Germany could not afford. He was, in large part, ignored. And the cost was not only in money and labor, it was in the machine itself. Because the Tiger that terrified the Allies had a secret. It broke down, constantly. Start with fuel. A Tiger carried about 530 liters of gasoline. That sounds like a lot. It was 27 jerry cans, or 3 full barrels. Otto Carius wrote that all that fuel would carry his tank only about 50 miles across rough country. 50 miles. A thirsty engine in a heavy hull drank fuel faster than Germany could supply it, and by 1944, Germany was running out of fuel everywhere. If you're an enthusiast of military technology and World War II, please consider subscribing to us. It would greatly help our channel. Thank you. Then there was the simple act of starting the thing. In the cold, the batteries died. When that happened, 2 crewmen had to climb out, go to the rear, and hand crank the engine to life like starting an old airplane. Picture that. The most advanced tank in the world, and grown men are out in the Russian snow, cranking it by hand. The famous road wheels were another trap. The Tiger used rows of wheels that overlapped each other. This gave a smooth ride and spread the weight, but mud packed into the gaps. In winter, that mud froze solid overnight. By morning, the tank could not move until the crew chipped the ice away. The same clever design that made the Tiger ride well could freeze it in place. Worst of all were the final drives, the gears that turned all that power into movement. They were not strong enough for such a heavy tank. They wore out and snapped. And when something broke, repair was a special kind of misery. Many parts were nearly hand-fitted to each individual tank, so a spare part might not simply bolt on. Field mechanics had to file and adjust to make things fit. Even towing a broken Tiger was a problem. It was so heavy that one recovery vehicle could not pull it. Crews needed 3 of the Army's largest half-tracks to move a single stuck Tiger. Going uphill, they sometimes needed 5, so a single broken-down tank could tie up an entire recovery team for a whole night. Now put all of this together, and you see why the Tiger so often failed before it ever met the enemy. There is one example that says everything. In early 1944, a heavy tank battalion was ordered to attack the Allied beachhead at Anzio in Italy. They had 45 Tigers. The drive was only about 90 miles by road, just 90 miles, yet only 18 Tigers actually reached the front. 1 caught fire. The rest, more than 24 of them, broke down along the way and had to be towed back for repair. The enemy never fired a shot. The road itself defeated them. Compare that to the American Sherman. The Sherman was not as well armored. Its gun was weaker. In a straight fight, a single Tiger could destroy several Shermans. German crews knew this and said so. But the Sherman had a gift the Tiger never had. It kept running. Patton's tanks drove all the way across France, more than 600 miles, fighting the entire way. When a Sherman did break, parts were standardized. A mechanic could swap an engine or a gearbox in the field, fast, and send the tank back into the fight. That was the real contest of the war. Not Tiger against Sherman, one-on-one. It was a whole system against a whole system. One side built tanks that could win a duel. The other side built tanks that could win a campaign. By the summer of 1944, the gap had become a chasm and the sky made it worse. The Allies owned the air over France. German tanks could not move in daylight without risking attack from fighter bombers. A Tiger could shrug off a tank shell. It could not shrug off a rocket from above or a column stuck on a road with no fuel. The great machines were forced to hide by day and crawl by night. The men still fought hard. That has to be said honestly. The crews who manned these tanks were often skilled, disciplined, and brave. Many were teenagers by the end, thrown into a losing war with too little training and too little fuel. They cranked frozen engines, dug out their own tracks, and held their ground against far greater numbers. Their courage was real, even though the cause they served was not. The Nazi regime that built these tanks was responsible for crimes on a scale the world had never seen, and no engineering skill can wash that away. Bravery and a terrible cause can live in the same machine at the same time. Even the great ace Michael Wittmann could not outrun the math. On the 8th of August 1944, near a French village, Wittmann led his Tigers into battle once more. This time the Allied tanks and aircraft were too many and too well placed. His tank was destroyed. He did not survive. The hero of Villers-Bocage was gone, killed in the same crowded, deadly Normandy sky that was swallowing the rest of the German army. As the front collapsed, a haunting pattern appeared. Allied troops kept finding Tigers abandoned by the roadside, perfectly intact, simply out of fuel or broken down. The crews had set them on fire or walked away. Tank after powerful tank lost not to the enemy's guns, but to empty tanks and broken gears. The monster that could not be killed in battle was killing itself by the dozen. So what is the final verdict on the Tiger? It depends on the question you ask. If you ask, was it a deadly tank? The answer is yes, absolutely. It was one of the most effective gun platforms of the war. Crews who fought in it trusted it. Enemies who faced it feared it. Even today, the surviving Tiger in the British Tank Museum draws crowds who just want to stand near the legend. But if you ask the bigger question, did it help Germany win? The answer is the opposite. The Tiger was a symbol of a deeper mistake. Germany kept reaching for wonder weapons, for the single perfect machine that would change everything. It poured its scarce steel, fuel, and skilled labor into a handful of brilliant, fragile giants. Meanwhile, its enemies built simpler tanks by the tens of thousands, kept them running, and buried Germany under sheer numbers. War between great industrial powers is rarely won by the finest weapon. It is won by the weapon you can build, fuel, fix and field in vast numbers again and again for years. The Allies understood this. They chose quantity, reliability and supply. Germany chose the perfect tank, and the perfect tank kept getting stuck in the mud. Look back one last time at that swamp near Leningrad on the first day. 4 invincible tanks sinking into the bog, dragged out by exhausted men in the dark. Everything that would doom the Tiger was already there on day one. Too heavy, too thirsty, too few, too hard to fix. Magnificent and helpless at the very same moment. The Tiger was meant to be the tank that saved Germany. In the end, it was a beautifully engineered answer to the wrong question, and the men who designed it, the workers who built it, and the soldiers who died in it were all serving a war that the numbers had already decided. The Tiger could win the battle in front of it. It could never win the war behind it. That was the lesson written in steel and mud and burning fuel across the fields of Russia, Italy, and France. The strongest tank in the world is still just one tank. And one tank, no matter how perfect, can never stand against a flood.